Hi, welcome to Let's Talk Local. Today, we're talking about local level social media marketing, and we're joined by Abha. Thank you for being here, Abha. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. My name is Abha. I manage global social media for ASICS, the running shoe brand globally, based in Boston, Massachusetts in the US.
Right on, and I'm coming in from Malmö, Sweden, where the PinMe2 offices are based. So this is a nice transatlantic conversation. And that actually transitions pretty well into the first thing I want to talk about, which was this distinction that we think about quite a lot at PinMe2 when it comes to social media, and that's the distinction between the brand level and the local level. And so a company with a lot of locations like ASICS, you'll have brand pages, which are a big pages that talk about high level stuff for the brand. Companies will oftentimes have one page for the whole brand, or maybe one per region, and then that's quite different from the local level pages, which companies will have for every single location they manage. And so at PinMe2, we work with connecting those, making it easier to manage both of them from the same place. And with you, Abha, I was hoping you could tell me a little bit about the differences between how to post locally and versus brand level, and just how the marketing strategies are different for those two different types of social media profiles.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that we definitely take a tiered approach. So we have a global team that kind of is in charge of managing, the brand, as you said, as a whole, and making sure everything stays consistent across the regions. But at the same time, we do have regional social teams in place, whether it's North America, Europe, Japan, Korea, APAC, to manage those regional pages. So we do have global brand accounts. For example, on Instagram, you'll go and you'll see ASICS as a global brand account, and that's something that I manage. But then we also have regional Facebook pages that are sort of geo-locked to a consumer in a specific country. So if I type in ASICS on Facebook, I'm automatically going to be redirected to the US page. If you're in Sweden, you'll be redirected to the European page. And so we rely on the regional teams to be posting local content based on the priorities of that region.
And can you give me an example of what a actual post would look like? How it would be different on a global page versus a local page?
Yeah, could it be outside of store specific? Can it be sort of anything?
Sure. Yeah.
So for example, if we take, let's say, a marathon or something like that, let's say we take the Los Angeles Marathon, which ASICS sponsors. As an example, maybe on the brand page, we might be talking about just the overall marathon partnership and ASICS sponsorship in it, maybe the history of the marathon, or something like that. Whereas maybe on a local level, if there's a European athlete that takes second place in the marathon or wins the marathon, maybe the European page will be more focused on that specific athlete and telling her or his story. Maybe the US page will be more focused on Los Angeles specifically because LA is in the US. And then maybe the other sorts of regions might not necessarily choose to participate much in promoting that specific marathon, but in Japan, they might focus on Tokyo Marathon. That's just one example.
And at ASICS in particular, how much say does the corporate headquarters have over what these individual regions or even the local store level, like what they're posting? How does corporate say, okay, this is what you're going to be posting and this is when, or how much flexibility is there?
That is a very, very good question. I would say the regions have a decent amount of autonomy because we do want to make sure that we rely on them as experts in their respective markets. It's hard for anybody to say, whether they're based in Japan or in the US like I am, to say that we know exactly what goes on in Brazil and what the consumer in Brazil would resonate best with. So we do give them autonomy, but when it comes to things that have more of a legal play, so for example, if it's a product, We will provide a toolkit of assets, as we say, of marketing assets that we provide to the regions to help guide in their posting, whether for resource reasons, better to have that centralized and have a single suite of marketing assets that they can use. But then they are free, even if we give them messaging points or the technological specs of the shoe, for example, they are free to both localize that in their language, speak in a certain more colloquial manner if they so choose. But when it comes to things like, let's say, an event, whether it's something like an Olympic Games or a marathon, there's just a lot more restrictions in place around if you're a sponsor, what you can say, if you're not a sponsor, what you can and can't say. So those are things that, even from a legal lens, we have to be more careful about. So in those cases, we do provide very strict guidelines of, for example, if we're talking about Australian Open, if we're not a sponsor of the Australian Open, we can't use even the tournament name. We have to say Melbourne or, the Blue Court or something like that, just to refer to the tournament.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. So it really sounds like a conversation between the high level and the local, and like a support. There's a support system in place there, so that the local people with that local knowledge and the way to communicate to the people that know best how to communicate toward the local audiences, they get support with assets and so on. And yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. And so the next thing I wanted to turn to is kind of the thing we have to talk about these days, as much as we all might be annoyed or not annoyed, but as much as we all prefer to be past it. But of course, it's COVID, and it's 2021 now, and it's still with us. And I was wondering, from your vantage point, how has the social media marketing that you've done at ASICS, how has that changed for your brick and mortar stores? And also, from those changes, what do you think is here to stay for the long haul, and what's just specific to these COVID times?
Yeah, great question. It's definitely been a learning experience, I think, for everybody. If anything, I would say that perhaps we had less interaction or engagement with store managers in the past compared to now, just because we almost thought of social and stores operating in separate silos, I want to say. Just because brick and mortar and digital were kind of their own separate pathways, and maybe as a consumer you used to think, or even as a marketer you used to think, that there are consumers that prefer to shop in store, and then there's consumers that prefer to shop online, and social is more designed for those consumers that are digitally focused for shopping. So I think, if anything, it's caused us to be more mindful of that relationship and making sure that there is one. I think during COVID specifically, again, we've definitely had to rely a lot on our local regional teams to sort of be that ear on the ground and operating based on their respective country limitations and safety protocols and things like that. I think the other thing that we've had to think about is, how can we help our respective stores traffic while also positioning them for the greater omni-channel landscape. So whether it's things like, I know that different countries refer to it in different ways, but in the US, we call it buy online, pick up in store, for example. In other places, they call it click and collect. So I've definitely learned a lot about the regional differences and somewhat similar behavior. But I think omni-channel, which is something that we had started thinking about even before COVID, but has really accelerated as stores are in varying stages of reopening, of how can we enable, whether it's using social, but even in general, whether it's our store hours or our store listings, how can we enable consumers, if they want to take advantage of those types of opportunities, as well as more of those in-store experiences where it's safe, around things like, you can go into one of our stores and you can have in pre-COVID times, you could get a running analysis done of, you run on a treadmill, and they look at the way you run or walk and your gait analysis, and then based on that, they recommend shoes for you. And that's something we used to really play up as a big sort of plus point of visiting a store. Now in most countries, even if the stores are open, those types of activities are still pretty sharply curtailed or non-existent at this point. So some of those sort of plus points of reasons to visit a store are kind of limited. But then I think on the flip side, also, it's how can we leverage some of the features in our stores around explaining our technology and really leveraging those for digital. So, in some of the bigger ones, we have, more of these, I don't want to say like a museum exhibit, but more of these types of things that really showcase the way the running technology works in an individual shoe, whether it's a diagram or it's something more interactive where previously people could see how, a diagram of a foot or a sculpture of a foot and a woman's foot versus men's foot and how running shoes have to be shaped accordingly. Those are things that, how can we now, if stores are currently closed, is there a way that we can leverage those types of things and tell those stories on our social channels to try and translate some of that experience? Definitely something we're still trying to figure out and not something that I've solved the case on. But I think lastly, in terms of the stuff that's here to stay, I think just having a seamless way to really delineate store hours that may be irregular, whether it's due to COVID or anything else. I think having a system and mechanism for that to be in place and being able to do that efficiently with partners like yourself, just knowing that every country moving forward is going to have very different policies. Even within the US, every state has different policies. So setting up that type of infrastructure, I think, is definitely here to stay and extremely important.
Absolutely. That's a lot of the talk I've been hearing is that, this COVID accelerated this shift to digital. And I was listening to another podcast this morning, and the marketer on it was saying that, he'd made all these predictions a couple of years ago. He said, this is what it's going to be like in 2030 or 2032. And he said he's moving all those forward now, 2025, 2028, because this is just, necessity breeds invention, right? So it's suddenly we've had to have the shift to digital has been forced on us. It's been sped up. And I like also the idea of not worse but different. For example, with the store experience, where you can't do this running on the treadmill and analyzing your running gait anymore, but you could now give this the interactive shoe deconstruction design that you're talking about. You can show that to people in a way that you probably couldn't do that in stores. So different experiences, and it's an optimistic way of looking at the whole situation, and I see it in marketing, but also just with the way our social lives have adapted too. And not to get too much off topic, but the Zoom hangouts that you do with old college friends and so on, that you might not have done if it weren't for being trapped at home so often. So looking for those silver linings.
Yeah, no, for sure. Those have definitely gotten me through COVID.
Yeah. And so kind of while we're on the subject of trends a little bit, are there any other trends you see that you think would be interesting to talk about?
Yeah, there's so many. I think I've tried to use, we just came back to work yesterday, but I've tried to use this time to learn about these sort of trend and consumer insights reports that are coming out post 2020. It's just so much to analyze and figure out how that shapes 2021. I think it's also going to be very different in different regions and cultures too, and how that changes depending on their digital landscapes and digital saturation before versus now. I think for, let's say, more digitally developed markets like the US, it becomes more around things like, awareness and action. So whether it's brands needing to take more of an issue on racial inequality, people being more interested in local government, and that goes back to the local versus global approach, something that people probably didn't think about as much before. Just general advocacy. I think in the US, people are really looking to brands to be those advocates and not just relying on individuals. I think that's really important. I think from a retail perspective, just as you said, the Zoom calls, the casual culture is really big. I think being part of a fitness brand is in some ways good because, not only are we have to keep focused on staying fit as much as we can, whether we're in isolation or going to work every day. But also just when it comes to casual culture, you can sometimes reuse some of your more athleisure wear for sitting at your desk, as opposed to previously if you were purchasing high heels or dress shoes or something. So sort of feeling lucky to be on a certain end of that right now.
Yeah. I'm dressed up for this interview. I'm actually wearing jeans, but normally it's the sweatpants or the running pants.
Yeah.
So now, ASICS. So now you can say you're making office wear at ASICS, home office wear.
I know. I'm typically wearing, maybe an ASIC shirt, but I had to put on a nice sweater for this interview.
Exactly.
No, but yeah, so, stuff like that. I think in maybe previously less digitally saturated markets, I think just expanding connection has been really instrumental, like you said. So, I'm originally from India, and looking at reading some of the reports of how much mobile saturation and penetration has made a difference in their landscape, not just for retail. Of course, e-com makes a big difference in being able to deliver to those types of more rural regions, but even just whether it's ed tech or, watching Netflix and things like that, I think all of those things have still permeated how we consume content. And then, I'm sure also I'm not as up to speed on it, but even financing, right? Like thinking about people that might have been in more cash heavy economies are now looking at digital payments, and making sure that our e-commerce platforms are set up for that type of thing, whether it's in store or on e-com, just making sure whatever current, credit systems are in place in that country, just being really on top of it, because consumers have very limited patience if even an e-com site doesn't support the latest digital currency methods, they might be less likely to use the site to convert for that reason. So I think those are some of the key trends that I've noticed.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Yeah, this time of year, you're right that you get your email inbox gets filled with 2020 summary or 2021 report. So 2021 trend forecast. So thank you for helping contribute to that. I'm sure we'll send this out in an email that says Abha from ASICS has a 2021 trend forecast.
Thanks to my partners at Facebook and Instagram that help collect that data. It's not me.
Yeah, well, on the subject of data, when I was doing my background research for this interview, I noticed that you had a math degree, or what sounded to me, who studied writing, so it sounded to me like something very mathematics, economic, quantitative, something.
Quantitative economics, close enough.
Right, right, and that sounds like a lot of numbers. And as you're someone who is very comfortable working with numbers, and I was hoping you could tell me what numbers should brands be keeping an eye on for their social media marketing insights? Like what are some KPIs to watch for to know if your social media marketing is working or not working?
Yeah, I think it definitely differs by organic social media initiatives versus paid. Of course, when you get into advertising, that has a whole slew of other metrics that are available. So I'll probably touch more on the organic side because that's more of what I manage. But I'm really excited actually just to see how much the social media platforms are doing to encourage whether it's shopping or any type of consideration or conversion. I think, maybe even 2 years ago, we were looking, of course, at you have awareness sort of KPIs, you have consideration, and then you have conversion, and it's like a funnel. And social media tends to, in the past, have been much more influential on the conversions. On the awareness side at the top of the funnel. And we would kind of have to justify all of our initiatives by saying, well, you can't always guarantee conversion. These are meant to be more of awareness driving metrics. And, as a numbers person myself, that is frustrating to say. And I can imagine for leadership to hear of, you're telling me to invest all of this money into these types of platforms and all I can get are impressions and reach. And that doesn't feel like I'm getting that much out of it. So I'm really excited to see, I think COVID definitely accelerated it, as you said, but I think social platforms have been focused on trying to enable more more commerce and more conversion on their own. So, for example, when you think about product catalogs, in the past couple of years, Facebook, Instagram, and those types of platforms have done so much to enable shopping, even organically. So even without adding any paid support, it really democratizes the landscape. Even a very, very small mom and pop brand can upload their catalog to Facebook or to Instagram and then start tagging their products. And, assuming that they have some sort of site that they can lead to, people can browse the products, look at them, read the product descriptions directly on these platforms, and then eventually get taken to the landing page if they so choose. And that really helps to drive consideration, I think, and gives people more KPIs to say, how many product clicks did you get? How many, you can directly attribute website visits this way in a more robust way. And I think now in the US specifically, we've launched something called Instagram Checkout last year, which takes it even a step further and allows US consumers to check out directly within Instagram, so they don't even visit e-com. So it's really interesting because it really takes away a lot of the barrier to purchase. If you are, browsing on your feed, you see an item that you really like, you can browse different colors, you can look to see if they have the sizing available. Once you enter your payment information, it's basically a one-tap sort of checkout. And when you the first barrier is having consumers trust social platforms to store their payment information, and that's something that all brands are going to have to sort of grapple with. But once they do, I just think it's going to be a game changer because once consumers as a whole get comfortable paying and checking out directly on social, the social platforms can make a case to really stand alone as their own marketplaces, similar to an Amazon, similar to an eBay, to really supplement, in my opinion, when it comes to KPI, then you can kind of look at it as a standalone similar to those. So if you're in Google Analytics and you can see, somebody visited this landing page, then they went to this product page, this product page, this product page, and then they left. That is considered strong consideration metrics, and maybe they'll come back and convert 2, 3 days, 4 weeks later. I'm really excited to see now with these types of launches that social platforms can do the same, of saying, if you're browsing these product tags, that should be the same really as looking at a product page on an e-com site. And it shouldn't just be considered an awareness metric. So, I think that, in my opinion, the platforms have done a great job with launching these in certain markets, hopefully more like Europe and Asia to follow. But I'm really excited to see how the metrics can kind of catch up to that. I want them to have that sort of robust analytics capability to say not just, how many product taps there were, but you can really look at a funnel and say how many products is an average user looking at before they purchase? What's the breakdown of male versus female? What are the different categories, whether it's kids' shoes versus adult shoes, whatever it looks like, to be able to really slice and dice that data. I'm really excited, hopefully, that they get there so that we can really make the case of social being its own, genuine conversion vehicle and tracking revenue.
Yeah, it reminds me of, and this is something I actually don't know a ton about, so I'm not sure I should be bringing it up in a podcast, but it reminds me of, I think they're called super apps. And the one I think of is, I think it's WeChat in China, and which is this app that, I guess it started as a messaging app, but then evolved. So it also has payment features and shopping. And it sounds to me, I actually don't use Instagram personally, so I hadn't seen this Instagram checkout feature. But it sounds to me like it's trending, it's heading that direction. If this is the same app, you can talk to your friends and see their photos, and then also buy ASICS shoes on as well. I think that's I think is fascinating, and also. It's interesting to hear your take on it as someone who works at a company who's, or your website will be getting less traffic, and this Instagram will be holding onto this traffic that might have otherwise come through your web shop. And it's interesting to hear you embracing it instead of, I could see a case for you being annoyed and saying, hey, we want those people to come to us. You can't keep us in there. But it sounds like you're embracing this and seeing that it can give you something.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good point, but I think that goes back to the need to make that case, right? Like me as a social media manager, I care more deeply about making sure that we're showing that social can drive genuine revenue, conversion, order size, that type of thing. But in order, as you said, in order to prove that that is the case and make sure that our global leadership can say, that we can say to them, even if you might see site traffic coming from social decreasing in this region because of X, we're actually seeing, revenue from this specific channel quadruple because of that lower barrier to purchase. But in order to prove that, like you said, we need those robust analytics capabilities. Otherwise, like you said, we do risk the, e-com traffic is down by 10% from social. And why is that? So yeah, great point. And definitely something that's on my list and radar.
Yeah. And it's actually, I mean, I also work with a bit with social media in my role at PinMe2. And we just had a meeting this morning where we looked through and said, okay, here are the inbounds we got over 2020. And here's how many of them came through this particular ad campaign. And it's interesting because I don't normally, as someone who writes maybe LinkedIn posts, not normally able to see that progression from, this person saw my LinkedIn post that I wrote, and then this many months later became a customer. And for PinMe2, I don't know if you'll ever be able to sign up to PinMe2 service through Instagram. Our B2B software might be a little bit harder that way. But it's a really interesting a trend to watch heading that direction. Yeah, thank you. I think we've covered everything in my notes. And you gave us some really, really fantastic, valuable information and a lot to think about. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was really fun.
Thanks. Yeah. Happy 2021.
Happy 2021.